There is.
Oh,
welcome,
guys. Let me stop you right there because it's been done. It's called All Filler No Killer. I don't know if it's necessarily the serial killers off of Wikipedia, but they go through like serial killers. I think it's actually just British killers, so maybe we can branch out.
No, Ross, this is
I thought you would.
Serial killers are wildly popular. It's not just that podcast. Like everyone and their fucking mother has got a true crime murder podcast.
All Killer No Filler. I thought you were talking about the debut album of Sum 41, but no, maybe not.
The podcast. Are you trying to say to me, Dave, that there is no such thing as an original idea?
Yes. But even in me saying that is not itself original, me telling you there isn't a single original idea is so unoriginal as to make me want to be sick.
Wow. This is an upbeat podcast.
I love how we're going live on our Halloween podcast, by the way.
Nice.
It's October. It's fine. It's October. It's fine.
Because I don't trust you to record correctly, so I like to have a backup.
Just double. I've double checked. I checked twice. I think twice is.
Sam, where's this coming from?
Ross's laptop somehow isn't even turned on. I don't know how he's talking.
Excuse me. How dare you?
I am getting a really bad rep here, guys, and I don't appreciate the scorn and the vitriol being thrown my way.
Is he recording?
I am recording.
With the right microphone?
A microphone.
Oh, yeah. 10 audio microphone in your laptop.
I feel like you're focusing on one small aspect of my podcast career. Yeah.
Yep. Ross Griffith will show up to 8% of the podcasts, and in 3% of those, he will have the right microphone.
Is this the Imaginary Movie Podcast or the Imaginary Slight Podcast?
Is Ross Imaginary Podcast is what we're now branding ourselves, Ross.
Join Sam and Dave on their descent into madness.
Did we imagine this Irish friend of ours? Is he even real?
Sam smearing shit on his webcam.
You decide which one of them dies first.
You decide.
Hello, Sydney.
Brilliant.
God, we're entertaining.
At least 3 people think so.
As you can see, listener and viewer, from our hordes of fans who are just tuning in every week. They can't help themselves. Week after week, hundreds of thousands of hits.
Hundreds of thousands of hits, yeah. Absolutely.
Millions of hits.
Jesus Christ.
Billions of hits.
Trillions?
That'd be ridiculous.
I presume we're not doing Ramblecast today. Are we doing Ramblecast?
No.
Let's do the movie.
Unless you've got a really hot take that you want. Hey, what about if we try our NFL podcast, but with Ross?
I feel like Ross will commit suicide on air. That could get some views, though.
It's about the format, Dave. We have to test the format, and I believe, Ross. I believe in your ability. I believe in your ability to have opinions about anything. Things you don't even know about.
I am pretty good at having opinions on
things. Ross, what do you think about
an NFL team? Name an NFL team right now.
Ross,
right now.
49ers.
Name an NFL player.
Oh, it's easy.
I can name you a manager, John Madden.
Name an alive NFL player.
The name's in my head. He used to play for the Miami Dolphins. He was in Bad Boys 2. Dan Marino.
Good pull from 20 years ago.
Is he alive? I think he's Dan Marino.
Dan Marino's alive. Yeah.
Bad Boys 1, actually, not Bad Boys 2.
He's in that unfortunate position, isn't he, where he's like, mentally not there because of all the brain injuries.
Yeah.
So they don't really like Tim Curry.
And Ace Ventura: Pet Detective.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, and Brett Favre was in There's Something About Mary as well. Football players everywhere.
Oh god, that was awful. Awful.
That was a horrible cameo, wasn't it?
Remember that
movie.
Episode.
Previous episode.
Callback. Okay, so let's do an NFL podcast. What I was going to say is,
I'm not prepared.
Well, let's lay it out here. We've got the Raiders. The Raiders are finally going to win, Ross, after all this time. What do we think is going to happen with them? Can Derek Carr lead them to two successive wins in a row, or do you think that's it for the season?
Who?
Can a man called Derek, Ross? Can a man called Derek succeed in today's
I got the team name.
Derek.
Can they lead them to victory?
Yeah, just right, Ross. What I want you to do, I want you to extrapolate literally from the fact that his name is Derek. So I want you just to build the mental image that you have of a quarterback and an NFL quarterback called Derek, and if he has just any chance of winning anything, just on his name, go.
No, I'm afraid Derek doesn't have it in him. Derek's not a very strong name, isn't it? I don't elicit leadership qualities from a Derek. You know, I would consult with a Derek. I would not take inspiration or instructions or orders from a fucking Derek. Listen, Derek.
Sit down. What Derek sounds like? He sounds like a software developer.
Yeah,
yeah.
Like when Sam said picture a quarterback, and I'm thinking, like a, sort of like hench dude, and then it's like a quarterback named Derek, and then I think of like any spoof movie where it's like your typical nerd in the over sort of size cleats and a helmet that's 3 sizes too big, and he's got glasses taped together in the middle and a pocket protector.
Can I just
amazing.
Ross, as we dive further into our NFL cast, can you, for the audience, explain what a cleat is?
Cleat, it's like the grips on the bottom of your football trainers.
Oh, it's fine. You touched your shoulders when he said it, and I was like, "Does he mean shoulder pads?"
I had.
No, it's fine. It's coincidental. You're on it. It's coincidental. Withdrawn.
He was turning into a gorilla live, scratching it. Yeah. I think that's a fair assessment of the Raiders, Ross. I think what we also need to talk about is their terrible running game. And do we think, man?
Josh Jacobs flashed.
Well, it's one guy. It's one guy. Do we think
Jacobs?
Josh Jacobs. Yeah, here we go.
2 touchdowns, Sam. Over 100 yards on the ground. That's not to be sniffed at from an RB1.
But you cannot turn your nose up at that, Sam. That's 100 yards.
100 yards.
Over 100 yards, Ross. I think it was like 127.
More than 100 yards.
So do we think?
And Sam, tell me this: how many yards in a football field?
Well, 109 yards is the maximum you could possibly return.
Fucking hell, he's done nearly the maximum you can return. You know what I mean? How much more could you ask of a guy? Well, 9 yards.
9 yards. You can see 9 yards well.
But is that a feat any normal human man can do? I don't think so. I think you're a bit unkind to expect as such, Sam. In this day and age,
I don't think we need Joe. I believe in Ross's ability. Never, not watching a single game the entire season. Just feeding off.
He watched at least 1/5 of that Super Bowl before he fell asleep.
And I learned everything there is
to know today
about the NFL.
Do you know what you learned, Ross? Was sleep deprivation means you can't have fun with your friends.
I learned that having a child takes a lot bigger toll than you would think.
Everything.
It took everything from me.
Everything. Yeah.
So you guys going to go and play Red Dead this week then, or what? I presume you've still got it, Ross, on like.
No, I'll tell you what I'm playing, guys. I'm telling you, get a PS5. Okay.
Fuck off with the PS5.
Listen, I don't want to hear.
Buy me a PS5.
I don't want to hear poor people problems. All right.
You literally want a PS5, and you wanted retail for it. Retail.
just buy one, right, and get the PS Plus. Like the mid tier one. The mid tier one's the best one, because what I have done is I got The Last of Us Part 1, platinum that fucking amazing game. It's the third time I've 100% of that game.
Loser.
You say lose. Last of Us fucking amazing, man. Oh, by the way, circle back to The Last of Us in a second. Then I did The Last of Us 2. Platinum that. Not as strong as the original, but still a damn good game. Sam and I were discussing it on the last episode. Number 3, then I played Spider-Man Miles Morales. Fucking amazing game. And now I'm playing again for the second time, Ghost of Tsushima, which is an absolutely delectable masterpiece of a game. You play as like a samurai, feudal Japan. The Mongols are coming to attack and invade. You're fending them off. Open world exploration. The scenery, Sam, you would lose your mind. It is absolutely stunning. Buy a PS5. Get PS Plus. Play these goddamn games with me, please.
I do. Ghost of Tsushima does look amazing. Actually, I've been. Yeah, I would.
Honestly,
I don't have the money to be buying a PS5.
This is it, and it's.
You bought 200. You spent £250 on a controller. You don't get.
Exactly.
You don't get the fucking
exactly.
thing.
I had to sell a child.
Ross, how else is Sam going to train for 9/12? I ask you.
This is my flight controller. Just for the
God, that is terrible. That is
Ross. It's been 21 years. I think it's fine.
No, but the suggestion is that Sam's going to fucking radicalize.
You were joking about the death of a 96-year-old woman.
You know what? You know what's going to happen? There's going to be another disaster, and then the ESRB is going to use this clip to fucking say, "Hey, see, it's video games. Video games all along. This is Sam Jordan. He was going to 9/12 everyone."
I like that as a verb. I like that's a good doing word.
Honestly, you've just given Republicans exactly what they need to not look at gun control again. I mean, they never will, but now they have a reason.
Did they need a reason?
Hey, that guy on the internet with the millions of viewers. It's his fault.
It's like Team America. Oh my God! It's like 9/11 times 1,000. Yes, 91,100. Oh, amazing!
It makes exactly that much sense. Speaking of horrific explosions and death, I've been playing Fallout 3.
Oh. Well, hold on. Before you get into this, you were playing Fallout New Vegas, and I assume you've abandoned that.
I abandoned it for a very good reason. I played the really good DLC, which is really good. The Dead Money one, which is the best DLC for that game.
Is Dead Money the one where you go to
casino? You rob the casino. Yeah. And it's nails because like they take everything from you and you can't.
And there's a gas.
There's a gas that kills you, and like it's just what it is as a perfect DLC. It's a game, like obviously, like your standard DLC where you put there's a quest or there's some nice horse armor. Horse armor is the famous one from Oblivion. Horse armor was a DLC. It did nothing. It did nothing but add armor you could put on your horse. It didn't protect the horse. Anyway, sorry.
What a ringing endorsement from Dave. It's
about
a game.
A 15-year-old DLC.
Not on the box.
No, hear me out here. It's a game in that it is obviously still a Fallout game, but it kind of asks you to play the storyline. It's not just like you'll arrive with all of your like late game New Vegas technology and armor and like beat the shit out of everything and loot everything like you do tend to in those games when you kind of plateau. It kind of reduces you back down to that level 1. It's really difficult. It forces you to listen. You have to play. You've got this exploding collar on your neck, so you can't get too near to speakers and things. Brilliant. So you've got to like tactically like look out for the speakers. You've got to destroy or deactivate. There's holograms you can't hurt that kill you.
So why have you moved on to Fallout 3 then?
Partly because for some reason, because with Game Pass games on the Microsoft Store, you can't mod them. All the files are encrypted. Not every Game Pass game is like this, but basically, like it's doable. But there's a lot of hoops to jump through to de-encrypt the files, so you can actually like. Basically, your mod manager needs to be able to read your ESM or exe file, and it can't do it if it's encrypted. So you can't like boot a mod. It's a right pain in the ass. So I stopped playing it because of that, and I basically finished it. So I started playing Fallout 3, which is also on Game Pass. And what a game!
Sam,
like genuinely,
yes, Sam, yes.
Keep going.
Amazing. So genuinely, like, is that not just one of the best stories in video games?
Fallout 3.
Yeah. Well, I'm playing as a female character because I've not done that before, and you get the perk, which is the Cherez La Femme or something, where you can basically flirt with all the men in the game.
Uh-huh.
I went to Megaton, and I've never managed to have the sheriff stay alive if you save Megaton, because you tell him that this guy was going to blow it up, and he gets killed.
You're pronouncing Megaton wrong, and I don't like it.
It's Megaton.
Megaton. Sorry,
you're like Megamind, from, like that movie, man. Like, you know, Metropolis, like Metro City, and he goes
Metrocity.
Metrocity,
yeah. And it's really rubbing me the wrong way, Dave.
Megaton, is that right? Megaton,
it's because he's from Yorkshire. He's just removing vowels like all over the fucking place.
Megaton.
Megaton.
We go to Megaton.
Good.
Megaton.
Been to Megaton. All right.
Can we move past this?
Come back.
We move past this. Can we move past this? Are we done?
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, you go and you talk to Mr. Burke, the guy who wants to blow up the town, and you basically flirt with him and say like, "Oh mate, I'll come and I'll meet you at the Tenpenny Tower," which is really funny. And he kind of rushes off and gets very embarrassed with himself. Rushes off, and then he doesn't kill the sheriff. And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And then later in the game, I went back into Moriarty's because there's only about 4 traders in the entire Fallout 3. So if you want Stimpaks, you have to visit all of them.
20 miles away.
Exactly. There's like literally there's so few traders in that game. So I've been to see Moriarty to buy something or other, and he basically, I'm not a post office, and I get all these letters from Burke like telling me how in love with me he is, and like that Tenpenny won't let him leave the tower, and blah blah blah. Really hilarious part of the game that I'd never ever played, and I must have played Fallout 3 for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours.
That's it's one of those games, Fallout 3, that is number one. It came out right when we were in like a peak of, you know, video games. That's all the time in the world. I can invest everything into this. I don't have to sleep.
We had that disposable income all the time in the world, and that vigor that only a 20-year-old man with 1,400 liters of Coca-Cola can have to play video games for 21 hours.
3 for £1.
And the coolest shoelace sweets.
Coast, yeah, exactly. And then
it's literally not legal. That sugar isn't legal anymore. They've changed the game.
Wow. Look at us. This is what happens. Don't do it, kids. You two will have a podcast that no one listens to in your 30s.
With millions of hits somehow.
Millions. I think it's my favourite Fallout of the two that are worth playing.
I think it's totally justified. Where I come down, it's just that New Vegas has.
I don't think I'm being harsh at all.
Fallout 4 is definitely the third one of that group. I will say that the noticeable difference between Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas literally are just quality of life improvements to the game. You can't aim down the sights of any gun apart from unless it's got a scope in Fallout 3.
Yeah.
Basically, when you aim down the sights, it basically just brings the gun over a bit, and it doesn't change at all.
You can't see any
and that was really going from New Vegas to Fallout 3. It was really like we couldn't have figured that out for 3.
No, that. No, we couldn't.
And the other thing that's annoying because it's a thing in New Vegas is like there aren't many characters in Fallout 3 that are unkillable. So in New Vegas, all of your companions in the general game on not hardcore mode, like you can take them places without fear that they'll be killed and then permanently killed. Whereas in 3, number one, because like the whole game is designed to just you fucking don't stop paying attention for a second and you're dead. Like it's really quite a lot more vicious than New Vegas. But you get a companion and they survive 3 seconds of a fight with 6 rad roaches, and you're like, "Well, that was fun. That was a load of help. Thanks for that, companion." My Brotherhood of Steel companion in there, like paladin armor and Gatling laser, and you're like, "Oh, and you're dead. Great,
and then
great."
Just flop. Just that lovely Fallout physics flop.
Yeah,
it's just amazing. I like how in games where they obviously didn't the ragdoll physics doesn't extend to like weight. So
yeah,
the animation is like if someone just removed all of the bones from the body and they just flop on the floor. And then they're like, and then usually their arms just carries on moving, or their head just keeps bobbing back and forward,
just spasming for some reason.
Not because they designed all that, because it's that's the way it is.
It wouldn't be a Bethesda game if it wasn't buggy as shit.
But we were talking about this earlier. Fallout 3. We're listening right now to Galaxy News Radio, and I managed to entirely miss all of the Three Dog quest, all of it, the entire thing. I didn't even speak to him, when I completed the game because because I went came out, and I just like exploring and managed to find Rivet City. I think Rivet City is where your dad is. I could be wrong, but anyway, I managed.
Rivet City sends you to the vault where he is.
Right,
but Rivet City is your first place that sends you where he's gone.
That's it. So I managed to find Rivet City. I'm like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah,
No, I'd never heard of it before. No one, and then walked in, did all that. As you say, they went to the vault, and there's my dad. And I'm like, and then you guys must have been talking about, you go and see Three Dog, and you have to go into the where the mutants are. And I'm like, I've never done this. I've never, and I don't think I still have because I've never properly replayed it. But that's what I love about that game is you could do that. You can't do that in so many games now because it's all online.
Loads of stuff by putting, and it's part of the reason the game's been beating the ever living shit out of me. I put all of my skills all my points into intelligence and charisma, and then that gives you loads of skill points, and I put them all into speech. And you're lock picking your science so that you can steal shit and break into shit. So I got to Megaton, if that's the correct pronunciation.
No,
Megaton.
Still isn't.
Say it for me again, one more time.
Megaton.
I said Megaton earlier, and you told me wrong.
No, you've been saying Megaton.
It's
Megaton.
Or Megaton.
So it's Megaton.
Megaton.
I'm going to pick up some more.
Megaton.
Say mega.
Mega.
Say ton.
Ton.
Pull them together.
Megaton.
No, but it's because he's got.
I'm not biting, Dave. Move on.
I'm genuinely. You're just making fun of my accent, Ross.
I'll tell you what. I'll move on for you. When you were talking about killable NPCs.
We're there.
No, I wasn't finished. What I was going to say is because you put the speech skill really far up, you get to Megaton, or however the fuck Ross wants to pronounce it, right? And then you talk to Moriarty, who won't tell you where your dad is. He wants you to go and collect all this money from him. And I used that flirt perk to flirt with him, and he told me where my dad had gone. So then I went to Galaxy News Radio. I had that one mission where you've got to kill the big super mutant, the massive one.
I wouldn't know.
Went and spoke to Three Dog, and he was like, listen, nothing's free in this world. I want you to go and do this. And I was like, well, speech fucking 45%. And it's like, all right, I'll tell you where he was. So I skipped that as well. And I was like, so I think I've done it in the past, but I was like, wow, sod that. Yeah, speech.
This is a shortcut. Wow. But that's what you need. That's what you need when you're replaying games. Because go on, Ross. Go on.
I was going to say, because just like Sam missed the Three Dog, when I was texting you, Dave, and I was like, get the Riley's Ranger armor. And you're like, I'm sorry, what? I'm like, Ranger armor, it's like the best armor in the game, and you just haven't done that mission. And I'm sure I've been sat beside you when I'm playing it, and I've gotten the Riley's Ranger armor.
And that's the difference because we played it in a time when you didn't. I mean, you had Google, but you weren't. You didn't like just go and do stuff. You had to buy the books. You had to buy the big guides, and like it wasn't the same level of detail. So you could play the entire game and not know about an entire quest line, not just one quest, an entire quest line,
a branching narrative,
because you just didn't come across it because the game's that big, and that we would actually tell each other and say, whoa, if you go over there and do that thing, and you'd actually have like a genuine discovery. And like, whereas most games now, because it's all like, whoa, maximize content, we must fill the user's fucking day. And every hour and every second.
They want every player to experience. But basically, they want this like reward from. They want every player to experience every piece of emergent gameplay.
Yeah.
Within the game, because
it will be emergent. You will emerge
because of Let's Plays, because of Twitch streams, because of YouTube. Whereas, like when YouTube existed when we were started playing video games, but it wasn't. No one wanted to sit and watch someone play. It wasn't the same. So. But because you've got that, you want the media to capture all these things. Whereas Fallout 3, I think, is much more of like a like a written video game. Like this is all on paper, and they somehow made it work. But there's stuff there, and the game isn't really concerned whether you read all of the computers about the war and all of this. Not really concerned about that. You can if you want, and that's Bethesda really that in that era.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Definitely, it was just so much better written, and you guys hit the nail on the head. They don't care if you explore every piece of it because guess what? That's what replays are for. And you boot it up again and say, instead of going right, I'm going to go left. Tidbit, when I first played Fallout 3, I didn't go to Megaton right away. I went straight.
Move on.
I went straight into a school, got the ever-loving shit beat out of me. So then I'm hobbling out of a school with a broken leg, no stim bags, 3 sticks of Radroach. It was painful. But you know what the best thing about it, because we were talking as well about how, or I said how Fallout 3 is one of the best experiences because it makes you feel so isolated in a desolate world. And the best way to sort of exemplify that was on my first playthrough, about 2 or 3 hours after I got away from the school. I still haven't turned around and went towards Megaton yet. So I'm wandering the wasteland, and I see in the distance I've got a rifle now, and I see these raiders. And I haven't clocked yet that raiders are a type of bad guy, and then there's other people. So that I am now suspicious of anyone I come across. Like Trader, bang! Like you would be if you actually came out of a vault. Everyone's trying to attack me, so I'm going to kill everyone.
It's like a Cormac McCarthy novel.
Jesus. In that game, if you go north or west, or west, there's nothing there. There's 4 map markers in that entire area, so it literally is a wasteland. You can walk ages and not find anything. And DC's a nightmare as well because of the way that you get the little markers. I spent ages because to get around DC, you've got to use the metros to go into the metro stations that all look identical. And
it's a total nightmare, isn't it? It is
find the right one to go to the place, and I'm like, "What's this place?" And then there's nothing there, nothing. There's a place. I think it's to do with the last mission, maybe. There's a place near the White House, but it's all boarded off, and you can't get down there. But there's nothing else there. There's a few super mutants, but there's not a single other building.
I remember the first time I had the brilliant idea. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. The underground is crawling with feral ghouls. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the surface, baby. And then I got gangbanged by 7 super mutants. Didn't do that again. Not until I had power armor.
It's a really punishing game, even when you're a higher level and you've got the armor and the skills and the guns. It levels a lot more harshly than New Vegas. Again, having played them both back to back as of now. But isn't that fantastic? How many games really in the last 15 years can you say? It's not like I played them once in 2007 when they came out or whenever, and then I'm playing them again now. I've played them several times over the last 15 20 years, and I'm still there's still things to get from that game, and. Do you know what I mean? I just think there's a lot.
How many modern games can you say the same? So
even good modern games. Good modern games.
Yeah, but we always joke about a 20-minute game. When you're I loved that. I loved Halo. Fantastic. I'm going to sit and play Halo, and you play it for 20 minutes and go.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. It may not be current anymore, but definitely recent. The only game that comes to mind for me that I easily finished 7-8 times is Dying Light. Now I know you guys might have mixed opinions on it, but that game, honestly, it just kept bringing you back.
That's the zombie parkour one I've been playing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I played it quite a lot, and then I fell off a bit. But I just got onto the second area. Am I in the end of the game, or is that just a second area?
No, you're probably at the midway point. You still go back to the first area,
and it's good. It's really good. But what I find really frustrating about it is, every weapon's just a lead pipe. It really bothers me. Many of the weapons are just lead pipes.
Wait till you get but you can scrap those and then use them for parts to repair.
I know. Good weapons. I know. I've got a hunter bow, and I had an iPad bat, and I had a baton that electrifies people. But The parkour is really good, and the overworld's nice, and the story's totally forgettable. But
100%. I did say that. I did say the story.
Parkour's fun. It's kind of like Assassin's Creed, but if that tower climbing was the whole game.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
is the second one any good?
I haven't played it yet. I've been meaning to get it. I was waiting for it to come out on Xbox Game Pass or PS Plus. That hasn't happened yet.
I can imagine that maybe fixes all of the like the little niggles and the quality of life stuff in Dying Light, which is not an old game by any stretch, but it's.
Well, the thing
I imagine the second one fixes a lot of that.
I'm not sure, man, because one of the things it was like, oh, you get to decide the path of, or the outcome of the city, and if you go with these guys, and it's always the same choice. You either go with the rigid sort of fascists or the sort of
rigid fascists,
or the anarchist rebels. Do you know what I mean? And it's either structure or it's pure anarchy, and it's like it's not meaningful. Just do what you did with Dying Light. Just do that again, like 21 Jump Street. Do the same shit. Find the drugs, get the suppliers. You know what I mean? That's all you gotta do.
It's where so many games fall down, I think, and it's a really good point, Ross. Because Fallout New Vegas is that, like the quest line in that is you can side with the slaver rapist faction, you can side with the US of A faction, or you can side with the sleazy Vegas capitalist faction, and those are your options.
Yeah,
basically, and it's like that's fine, but it's not good writing. It's not good, and video games can be stories. Like The Last of Us, a great example. Great narrative game. Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2, great narrative gameplay. Dying Light,
not so much.
I say that's where the list ends of good.
You could have loads. You could have so many. You could have so many. It's such a good story in that, even in the framework of that game. But it's just lazy, tropey writing. Like there's a woman she's really what's the word? She's really capable, and then she's strong-headed, and you've got the young guy who's really impetuous, and he's going to go off and get killed in Act 2, and
yes,
the bad guy's chopping people's limbs off and fucking like annihilating people and stealing medicine from orphans, and you're like, fine, but does every villain have to be Hitler? Like, does every villain have to be Hitler? It's just such a strange decision.
Speaking of The Last of Us, have you guys heard that The Last of Us is getting a TV show?
No, and I couldn't give two shits.
I don't. I couldn't bring myself to watch to play the second one just because I was like, you know what? Gonna put a little bow on that game, and that's me done. I'm happy to move on and never. I'm happy for it to be a self-contained thing. Why do we need to franchise everything? That's what I'm asking.
Well,
money, money.
But what I would say, and I was the same thing. I was like, oh, why would you do this? Why? Until I saw the trailer. Now, I can't remember the name of the guy, but he played the Viper in Game of Thrones. He plays Joel. And I was like, how's that? And like his accent, his voice is pitch perfect. And Ellie is played by the lass who played Lyanna Mormont from Game of Thrones. And like the trailer is like, okay, you know what? HBO, you guys won me round. I'm going to be watching this. And
poor guy.
I think
it's a shame, Ross. It's a shame that you're being gaslit by the corporations.
I'm just saying.
I'm sure, Ross. I'm sure it will be fine. But I've kind of already experienced that story in like its primary glory. And maybe if I hadn't, then it would be really, really good. But I've kind of done, like Sam says, I'm kind of happy to put that in a box on a shelf and be like, that was really excellent. And that's fine.
My bow analogy wasn't good enough for you?
If you want to watch fucking 17 animated series about one throwaway line in The Last of Us, that's your business. And if people are going to make money off it, great. But there.
I mean, there are examples of it really done poorly with sort of like
everything.
I suppose like in a predatorial sort of style. I mean, like if you guys remember Dead Space, when that first launched, like they were doing like, yeah, it's going to be a horror game. But they were also like, at the same time, they were planning to do the Dead Space anime series, the Dead Space on-rail shooter game. They were planning to do all this in line with it because they didn't think the horror game itself was strong enough. So they wanted all this to sort of augment it. And, and all those things failed, but the game itself was masterpiece, absolute gaming masterpiece. So I get that it's sort of like, it's not very sort of, a lot of stock placed in the game IP. But go on, Sam.
Well, as I said, let's get on to Scream soon. But I just think, you know what? If there's money to be made, that's the death of it, isn't it? That's the end. Is when we're having to there's market cap that we can exploit because we've got these sweaty nerds called Ross who are like, no, I'm joking, but they just take it down. They just take it down because they know that they can do it. So they destroy the
we wanted this. Like, as fans, we rapidly demand, more and more sequels, in games, in TV, in cartoons, in films. Like, we rapidly want more. And generally, traditionally, we didn't get it because of diminishing box office returns. Because, as a rule, the quality declines when it's fucking Batman 47. And, the only character who's been in all of them is Alfred, who's 192. Eventually you're not going to make any money. And so you get, with the exception maybe of James Bond, perhaps in the 20th century, no huge franchises really, right? And then we got some franchises, and guess what? People just fucking eat up the shit. And they just crank more Pokemon, they just crank more and more of it out, and it just gets eaten up and eaten up and eaten up. And now we're at a point where you've got things like Game of Thrones, which become this enormous great. And I don't want to get into Game of Thrones. We've done our bit on that. It's also past time. But you get things like that become wildly successful and make loads and loads of money. And what that teaches studios and TV networks is that they can do the same. It's like you and I looking at a really talented artist who's made this phenomenal piece that's really successful and going, I could do that. There's money to be made there. And it's like, no, don't do that, because you're just going to crank out fucking 45 boring 6-hour-long DC movies that nobody likes.
Can I just point out the fact that we're basically doing that right now with this very mediocre podcast?
We are the problem.
200 episodes in, and we're not going to stop, and we're not very good, and no one cares.
You know what I mean, though? We're not monetizing it in the same way. It's not like...
Oh, no, we're not.
Well, because we can't. Not because we took a moral stance.
Right, Ross, but right now I am poor, and therefore I can afford to have scruples, and I can afford to have opinions and a stance on things. If I'm rich, I'm like, well, maybe I'll keep my head out of this.
You can barely afford both your kidneys, all right? So let's relax.
Exactly. As we just jump to our sponsor. This episode brought to you by Squarespace. Right, well, let's talk Scream now, please, because
imagine that was actually a thing. Like, we managed to get a sponsorship, and Sam just didn't tell us. Like, Sam's keeping all that money for himself. Oh no, I can't afford
you guys the ad-free feed.
Money, that money. I mean, based on listenership, by the way. Sponsorships generally get paid on the number of listeners you have, Ross. So
not if I'm doing the negotiation, Dave.
Amazing. Right, let's do Scream. Sam seems rabid to get out of here.
No, I'm not rabid to get out of here. I just know what's going to happen. We're going to Ross is going to find some reason to leave.
Let's crack on.
Timmy stuck down a well.
Right, I'll turn off the music as well.
It's turn off the Fallout music. That'd be strange behind Scream.
It was nice, though, wasn't it? I like having a bit of audio accompaniment. That was
yeah.
Will that see what it sounds like in the podcast?
If we clip this bit and then it will. Yeah, but I'll just take it from this file
because obviously you got things about like rights now. You could get like a
fuck them.
Strike. Fuck them. We've got that fuck you money, right?
We just get like a take it down sort of thing. They can't have any money if we don't have any money.
Honestly, it's really just like nobody cares.
I trust me. they care.
Not on audio. Yeah, on YouTube maybe. But again, copyright strike my account. Go ahead, please. At least someone's watching.
It's the copyright people watching. We're just doing it for the copyright company.
You know what the worst thing is, Sam? No, they're not. It's a bot.
It's a bot.
It'll be a bot. Strike. The one little like sliver of light you had, just snuff that right out.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Right. Scream. Go. Good energy, though. Good energy. This is what we need. Let's go. Come on. This is the prime time. Looking swole, Ross. Looking swole.
I have been going to the gym lately.
Good man.
Nice.
I have to get up at like 5 a.m. tomorrow to go to again. Yeah.
That's dedication, man. Right. Let's get into this. Let's get into this 1996 movie. I was amazed how many 90s movies we've done, by the way.
Offensive. Right, go on. We'll talk about the episode. Go.
Offensive.
Hello, and welcome to this very special Halloween episode of the Imaginary Movie Podcast, a spooky podcast where we watch a Halloween movie and then we talk about it. My name's David, and I'm joined by a couple of Scream Queens.
Nice. My name's Sam, and who am I? The beer wench?
No, not busty enough.
Oh, damn it.
And I'm Ross. Sam behind you. Sam, look. Sam, you stupid fuck. Look behind you, goddammit. Idiots.
Every time.
So this week, for our Halloween episode in the month of October, we watched Scream, the original from 1996. No, that's right. We did not watch the 2022 one. No, we did not watch any of the other intervening 4 sequels to this movie. We watched the original.
Are we up to Scream 5? Is that where we're up to?
I think we're on 5. I think it's 5.
Scream 5 is the screaming.
Something.
I think the new one's just called Scream, though. I think it's just Scream 2022.
Scream again. Yeah.
Yeah, they do that, don't they? It's like, no movie.
It's such bullshit. Yeah,
I remember.
Call it Scream 5, yeah.
I can remember 1996. Just chill out, all right? You can't just...
Yeah.
It's just... Anyway, we are watching Scream, and this is one of those films that for years and years, I was like, this is a shit film. In fact, even Scream 2, which is like, it's just trash. It's just trashy Hollywood trash. And actually, shock horror, this is a pretty fucking good movie.
I'm impressed. I am genuinely. I'm blown away.
It is. It is a really good film.
It suffers from obviously like all those sequels, which, by the way, I know how we love sequel names. These are just Scream, Scream 2, Scream 3, Scream 4.
Do you know what? I prefer that. I prefer
up until
I know where
Scream
I am.
5, which is now Scream again, so I'm confused. I mean, what is this, like some kind of time travel?
Just to stop a tweet from our imaginary listeners, it's just Scream, the word Scream again. Not Scream again, Scream.
But this is the problem. Time. This is the problem.
Scream
I'm having
5,
to call it Scream 5 so that you know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, I go, have you seen the new Scream film? And they're like, what?
Well,
we don't
want a repeat of the Ghostbusters fiasco, do we, Sam?
Exactly.
Watch Ghostbusters. Which one? You haven't even watched Ghostbusters. Fuck you, Sam.
Exactly. Yeah, I had seen this before many years ago, but I also have relatively recently watched part of Scream 2 and was like, again, this is quite fun.
You're watching that by mistake, and then you're like, "Oh no, it's the first time we're watching."
Yeah, well, yeah, but had you both, Dave? Had you seen this before, Ross? Had you seen this?
No. I was going to say when I was a pretty scaredy little kid, to be honest. I can admit that.
And adult.
In my 30s. No. I actually really enjoy these kinds of films now. But when I was like 12 or 13, which is kind of like the peak age for us to be watching a 1996 horror movie. Like you've got some friends around and you're like all trying to look like you're the coolest kid in the room. So I just avoided horror for years and years. So I hadn't seen this before at all.
No, nor I. In fact, like watching through this, like I said in WhatsApp, the because I watched Scary Movie before I watched Scream, and now I know why it's called Scary Movie. But honestly, like watching Scream, and I'm actually quite impressed by extension with Scary Movie because they nailed the references, and so I think maybe it's because I watched Scary Movie first that my expectations is like this is going to be fucking like terrible, but in a good way, or we can bitch about it. And honestly, number one, I was impressed by the overall quality. Number two, I was sort of shocked at the sort of severity of the killings. Do you know what I mean? Like the very first guy you get, like after the opening scene, Drew Barrymore and her boyfriend's out on the patio, and he kills. I mean, we should get into some point about the logistics of these guys killing people because
it's horror movie rules, Ross. It's fine. It's fine. But anyway, go on.
But anyway, but then she turns on the light and the guy's literally gutted, fucking intestines pulled out. I'm like, whoa. This is something serious.
Going for it, isn't it? Now, It's funny you say Scary Movie because this film was originally going to be called Scary Movie.
Scary Movie.
Why Scary Movie is called Scary Movie until they decided to change the name. Good
it's
choice,
funny because that would have been so much more on the nose, and Scream's already quite on the nose.
Even in their marketing, even in like some of the dialogue, where he calls up, what's your favorite scary movie, and they rip that line from Scream into Scary Movie. They rip it off. Like you look at the poster, and someone has taken their love of scary movies one step too far. Like it is, like you say, on the nose.
But this is
if Scary Movie didn't exist, this is the satire of horror movies.
Yeah, this is what I think. This is what I'm trying to say. This is why I think this film is really good because what it is doing, it is like shining a light back onto horror movies and saying, look, this is what you do. It's a tropey movie. It's actually a horror movie lovers movie for me. This is and I don't like horror. I really don't like it. A bit like you, Dave. Bit of a scaredy cat, I think. But even as an adult, I find them really stressful. And it's not because I'm like squeamish necessarily. As I'm getting a bit older, I'm like less into the kind of like the violence. Definitely,
as you care less for people.
Yeah, I'm just like, I don't want to see someone's like throat being pulled out. Like just literally I don't want to watch that. But what I do really enjoy is like movies where they're playing with the audience expectations and they're playing with the tropes. You referenced it at the beginning, Ross, with the bit where he's behind you, you idiot, and it's one of the guys shouting at
at the screen
at the movie Halloween. Thank you. And then the guy is behind him, and then they go even further. They have them watching it in the van, him shouting at the telly, and them shouting at him at watching them. While and you think like, and then they made a Scary Movie about it, and so it's just references and tropes all the way down, and that's what I think is really impressive about this film is that it's not trash because it's so easily could be the schlockiest, teeniest, just absolutely like bottom of the barrel of blockbuster video movies that it could, and it's not.
I think in my mind this manages to be a scary movie, not like the parody, but like a horror movie. This manages to be a horror movie with like a somewhat compelling plot and whodunit, and it's a nice reveal. I think the ending's really belabored. We'll get into that, I think. And I've got maybe a little bit of a fix because again, we can fix great movies. But I think this successfully does both. I think this successfully is a good horror movie. Like the kills, like I said, the kills are great. I think these 50 liters of fake blood in this movie. I think the gore and the violence is great. I think the suspense works really, really well. The phone call thing, which has been done a million times since, and obviously a few times before as well. I think that works phenomenally well. I think all of that is firing. While it's also quite funny, and it's also quite like a film lovers film, where you've got all these jokes about the rules, the video store guy.
Yeah, you had
is
sex.
Like, oh well, virgins, as soon as they have sex, they die in a movie, and basically this film is obsessed with films. And we watched Election recently, and that's another film that's kind of like obsessed with the rules and a film lover's film. And I always kind of enjoy that from that point of view of obviously the people writing this were definitely like, there's going to be loads here for us to dig into about, these movies we love, know loads about and we love, and we're going to use those tropes while at the same time maybe like shining a light on them a little bit.
Yeah. And why is this a film lovers film? Where does that come from? It comes from director Wes Craven, who did Nightmare on Elm Street, and that's like this guy is a big horror a director who kind of like not invented, but certainly popularized and developed, I think, the slasher type of genre. This type of movie where it's teenagers running around a house, in various stages of undress to titillate and to be killed. Yeah, and so it's like this film is like the ultimate endpoint for him in a lot of ways because he's just gone.
Well, no, I was the point you've touched on. That was one of the things I was going to say, and I hope I don't sound like a massive pervert when I say this, but because it's a 90s movie, because it was a slasher flick, I was expecting, not hoping, expecting,
but also hoping.
Ross, this is a safe space with
it is absolutely not a
hundreds of people watching and recording every single thing you're saying and sending it directly to your wife. Go on, it's fine.
For the genre and
Amy, are you listening?
I feel I need these caveats in there for the genre and the time the movie came out. I thought there would be more scantily clad women being chased about a forest. You know what I mean? Like before they're killed. It's also like the first sort of movie. I mean, I only watched last night, but it must have been like one of the very first movies that not only reference real life movies in its own movie, but also movies of the same genre. I mean, other than like, Avengers before that all became like the MCU, when did you ever hear of like, like the Terminator referencing RoboCop? You know what I mean? Like it doesn't happen.
Well, usually a movie references fake things, don't they? So
yes.
A lot of the time, like zombie movies, zombies don't exist. They don't know what zombies are. That's a big trope, isn't it? Like same with vampire movies. Like vampire lore doesn't exist. And
I mean, Last Action Hero actually does one of the best bits of it, where Arnold Schwarzenegger and the kid are in like a video store. And the kid's trying to prove to Arnold Schwarzenegger that they're in a movie. And he goes, oh, look. And he finds like a poster, like a standee for the Terminator. And it's Sylvester Stallone on the motorbike. And like Arnold's like, oh, I love this guy. And it's a great way, like that. Not only do they reference movies, but like they swap the actors. And you're right, Dave. Yeah, zombie movies, you're like, this is a brand new thing. We've never explored this before.
Yeah. Well, because they don't want the characters to have knowledge of, like in this movie, and I think this is what I mean about it. It handles the line, I think, really well. Of this isn't scary movie. It so easily could be scary movie. Like you just make it a little bit wackier and a little bit sillier, and this is scary movie. Which, by the way, is your like sexy, scantily clad teenagers running around a forest, and is all of the things that this movie isn't, because it's a parody of the genre at large. Which, Ross, you are absolutely right, is massively guilty of. Like, oh well, let's make a really good horror movie, but also like, let's put some tits in it for the dads, and that is so prevalent. You know what I mean? Like in an old 80s horror movie.
Fine.
So, like, that's very, very true. But I think it handles it really well. And again, the fact that they have all these characters have the knowledge of they're conversant in like horror movie tropes, yet they ignore all of it. I just think that's like it's fun. And you've got the nerd who's like, oh, she's behind you. Oh, you can't do this. Oh, you're the murderer because X, Y, and Z, and you're the murderer because X, Y, and Z. I think he even accuses actually this character. Accuses both of the serial killers of being the serial killer. So he accuses Shaggy of being the serial killer, because when Drew Barrymore's being killed, because that's his ex-girlfriend. Was it Matthew Lillard? Is it Matthew Lillard?
Who cares? It's the guy who played Shaggy in the live action.
It's Shaggy.
That's enough for us to. That's enough for us to go.
He was also in Hackers with Angelina Jolie and the dude from Dawson's Creek.
Right, and then there's the other one who isn't the guy who played.
I only know his name because it's not a name.
Yeah. Also about him, and thank you because I don't know his name either. I'm not going to learn it. But I mean, I remember texting you guys. I was like,
"What about Shaggy or Skeet here?"
No, not Shaggy.
Shaggy's partner in crime. And
Skeet's
I remember, I told you I'm not going to learn it.
His name is
my
Skeet.
terms.
We can't remember
it, Dave.
You don't know anyone else called Skeet, Ross.
I'm not going to remember Skeeve's name. All right. So.
Do you remember at the start of this podcast, people were like, okay, let's talk through the cast. Now, 200 episodes in.
Tell you what, Sam, let's count how many fucks I give. No.
We don't even care what his name is. We won't learn it. I'm gonna take this
creepy fuckers.
I'm gonna take this pen and shove it up my nose to make sure that I don't remember their name. So... Bring it on.
Anyway, I apologize,
Trevor.
Ross. Ross. What was your point?
So anyway, the thing about Scarv was I couldn't.
When he killed me after, it was just a lot.
Yeah,
it was a lot in this horror movie.
I actually said Scarv, not Scar. But I texted you guys saying this guy's giving me creepy vibes, and I mean, it's a testament to the guy's performance. But even when you expect. Because again, because I watched Scary Movie, I know how this was going to turn out. But I thought in when I was watching Scream for the first time, that once he's sort of been cleared of the charges, that they would try and make the character more likable. You know what I mean? More, oh, he's actually a good guy. But they just doubled down on his creepiness and his predatory sort of interactions with people. I mean, the way they interact with the character, I'm also not going to learn his name, the one who worked in the video store. And he was really
call him the
nerd. And they really bullied him as well. And it's, I mean, again, it could be a fantastic performance, but you would really expect at that point in the movie where they would try and fool you and subvert it and go, oh, see, he's actually a good guy. And then there's the double twist. But all through, he's a cunt.
Well, in my mind, actually... though, Ross, that kind of is it's the false flag, isn't it? Because the nerd says the dad's a red herring, but you're also kind of thinking, is it a dad?
Yeah, you can't fool me, movie. Yeah.
But then you think it's Billy because, Ross, like you said, this actor is doing a really good job about being creepy, but the movie is consistently saying, no, it's not him.
It's Scooby-Doo. It's Scooby-Doo. It's a bit in Scooby-Doo where they come across...
Right, Shaggy!
It happens every single... It happens every single episode. They come across some fucking hermit guy or some miserable janitor and they go in and you think it's definitely him. Look at him. He's evil. He's evil. It's definitely that guy. And then, fast forward to the end of the episode, they pull off the mask and who it is. It's the lovely coach, or it's the guy who works in the library because right. So the movie knows that the movie knows that you know the rules. And so it's leaning in, if that makes sense. It's leaning in on the fact that this is a relatively tuned in audience who understands how movies are made and how horror movies are made.
Understand that their expectations are being played with in this movie. I think like a viola.
Yeah. So Billy, Utrecht guy. Yeah. So Billy is
the Dutch guy.
Yeah, he's played as 2 seconds. Let me just get this out. Let me just my brain to catch up with what I'm saying. So he's playing the creepy guy, and your initial reaction is, the movie is trying to make me think that he's creepy and he's bad, and so I'm going to say you're not. Now, what the movie is actually doing is making you think that he's creepy, and then you go, no, you're not, and the movie goes, okay, that's fine, but actually he is. And so it's so many subversions of your expectations.
We think he's the bad guy. We think he's not the bad guy. We think he's the bad guy. They have sex. and he gets murdered, and we're like, oh my god, he wasn't the bad guy after all, and then he was the bad guy.
Exactly, and that's the other thing with this movie. Kevin Williamson, the writer of the script, who spent ages and ages and ages like working away at this, and real struggling Hollywood writer, the whole 9 yards. It's making the baddie two people. Like, that is such a simple thing, and it completely messes with your perception of what's going on. It really fucks you up because you're like, but how? Because again, you're used to these killers in movies being able to move around really quickly. Like, you go in a corner and they're gone, just like in 2 seconds, just like in Hot Fuzz, where they go around a corner and then they got the guy's really, really far away, and you're like, oh shit, how did that happen? And again, it's the same trick in Hot Fuzz. There's loads of them, and so that's why it works. Sorry, go on, Dave.
The great.
No, I was just going to agree generally. I think it's really clever from a filmmaking point of view, like from a scripting point of view as well. And there's a few times they do this in the movie where they kind of like A leads to B leads to C, where the principal, the Fonz, apparently, allegedly, they weren't sure how they were going to get the party to empty out, so they could only have like, so it's not, the body count isn't like 45 people in this movie.
Yeah.
And the way they did that is they killed the principal off because there's about 30 minutes of this movie where no one gets killed. So they killed the principal off, so they had a murder in the middle of the film, and then that meant that they had somewhere to send everyone from the party at the end of the movie. But the way that they have two guys kind of informs this whole movie. And I was thinking about it because I actually sat down and rewatched the first sort of like 20 minutes of this earlier, because it's my absolute favorite part of the movie. The Drew Barrymore bit of this movie, I think is just like, isn't that just a wonderful, like, if you just took that by itself, that is a wonderfully shot, paced, and like designed little horror scenelet. And then to kill Drew Barrymore from the beginning. But the fact that there are two of them, like, I can, in my head, you can picture how it's happening. So one of them, Billy's talking to Drew Barrymore on the phone while Shaggy is outside murdering the boyfriend she's watching. Like, of course, there's two of them. It's the only way that
the logistics,
all the movies make sense that there are two of them. When he says, I'm out on the front porch, and one of them's actually at the back, so she's like, you're a liar, and she goes out and there is somebody there, and it's like, again, the whole movie is kind of plotted that way as well, where there being two of them kind of explains a lot of why what they're doing works.
It's also, I think, a real love of the craft, because you can rewatch the movie, you can watch the movie again, and the killer is that there's two of them. But what you don't know is who's who, at certain points, and you can deconstruct exactly as you're doing there and saying, right, so he must be over there and he must be there, and then these SWAT, like, it's just so well considered and so well, like, I think there's a lot of love that's gone into making this, and that's where I think, for me, the reason it holds up all the way from 1996, because let's not forget, we have not just this movie has been taken and gobbled up by the trope machine into Scary Movie, but also all of the other things that it's done in the film over the last 20 years have been pulled into how horror movies are made now. So we're seeing like the recycled features of this movie over and over and over again, and it's still fresh. It's still fresh from 1996, a horror movie, and I wouldn't have thought that would be like possible.
A lot of that good writing by a good choppy horror director, and practical effects. Like, this is a fucking stage production levels with retractable knives and squibs and buckets of fake blood, and there's not a lick of CG. Apparently, the most difficult effect shots of the movie are in the opening with Drew Barrymore's corpse. That's a mock-up basically, so that they can hang her from
it was prosthetic, like chest, head and upper torso, was it, I think? And then they
no I think the Drew Barrymore one was all like a model basically, and maybe her head was on there, but most of it was a model.
It was a
the boyfriend was his shoulders and head. He was basically like crouched behind the chair, there was no back on it, and then the front, the body in the chair with all the spilled guts, is like a prosthesis, and those were the two most complicated effect shots in the movie.
Right,
so that's why it holds up, because we haven't got fucking loads of 25-year-old CG in this movie.
And massive point there, Dave. But also I was going to say, because Wes Craven's the one sort of the driving force behind it, and I was going to say it's not a movie made by committee. Do you know what I mean? It's one guy's vision. This is what we're going to do. One guy calling the shots, and you get a cohesive sort of experience, rather than, well, it should be this for the 15 to 18s, and we should have this interest for the 24 to 27-year-olds, and so on, and yada yada yada, where it's just, it dilutes and it loses the value of the movie you want to make. It's not.
Yeah, and a lot of that, Ross, I think that's another great point. A lot of that comes down to the fact this is a $14 million budget.
Yeah,
which obviously isn't nothing, but $140 million movie, the studio is going to be involved in every step of the process because they've got a lot of money on the line. $15 million, it's not chump change, but if it bombs at the box office, you just write it off for tax, and it's not. Do you know what I mean? It's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
And I know, obviously, DC just famously wrote off a several $100 million movie that they'd finished for tax. But in the 90s, I mean, the industry was just smaller. I really do think this is the golden age of cinema for a lot of reasons. The fact that CG wasn't massive means that these movies have held up so much better than maybe if this was 2006. This movie would look like shit.
Yeah. Well, also, I'm gonna take a wild guess and suggest this was shot on film in 1996. Could be wrong about that, but there's also
I think it was,
an element there which I think just adds to that timelessness. I really miss that from a lot of to a lesser extent now.
This was shot on film.
I know. So right, let's talk about film nerd stuff. I love the audio design in this. I love the sound design. There is constant noise and ticking clocks, and the sound of knives. When Drew Barrymore's got a knife and she's
the scissors with the Fonz is using in the office. That's the one bit for me that was like,
scissors.
The scissors that the Fonz is using in the Henry Winkler, the principal, is using when he's expelling those people.
The whole thing is wonderful. The Foley work and just the you get so much information from the movie because the sound is doing all that work for you. From everything from the squelches of a knife going in to footsteps and creaks, and it's just brilliant. It's really, really good. The other thing that I really love about this is this cast, who pretty much unknowns. I think they had Henry Winkler, but they didn't. He's uncredited, I think, because they didn't want to be making a big deal of
Henry Winkler. Yeah.
Well, we've talked about Drew Barrymore, who is, apart from Henry Winkler, the biggest name. Maybe Courtney Cox, possibly. But
Courtney Cox is peak Friends, but then even her.
Well, no, we're only in season 2 of Friends, so we're not really Friends are earning $1 million an episode yet. Friends is popular, but it's not. She's not the biggest star in the world. Drew Barrymore was the real pull, and I think it's easy to forget that because obviously Drew Barrymore now is kind of a nobody. She's not done a lot in the last 15 years, really. But in '96, she was really just transitioning from being a child star to being an adult star. And so her signing onto this movie and her headlining this movie does two things. Number one, that's it's Drew Barrymore, and Barrymore is an acting family. That's a name, there's credibility right there. That's a person people have heard of. And number two, when you kill her in the first act, everyone's
I was about to say,
holy shit, this movie, the wheels are off. We're fucking, God knows what's going to happen.
Drew Barrymore's coming back, right?
she's not back, dead, right?
No.
We've got
the other actors in this. You've got Courtney Cox, obviously, is a somebody. I think David Arquette had been on Saturday Night Live or something. He'd done things.
Can I ask, is this the same David Arquette that Courtney Cox later marries?
Yeah, they met on this movie, I think.
That's amazing.
You've got Neve Campbell was on Party of Five on TV again, season 2. So she was sort of known, but as a TV actor. And there's always nowadays, I think the line is a bit more blurred, but it's Neve. I've looked at it. We decided it's Neve. And the line is more blurred now, but I think in '96 that you're either a TV. Not everyone is Bruce Willis. You're either a TV actor or you're a movie actor. You're not both. So she's relatively unknown. Rose McGowan, who's the friend in this movie, She was in like every teen murder movie in the 90s, and I've seen most of them. Like this is very much like the sort of movie she's in. I don't know if I've seen Billy in anything, and obviously Shaggy went on to appear in those Scooby-Doo movies. I think that's kind of it. That's it for notable cast members,
but what it is a classic horror movie ensemble, isn't it? You know, but again, the movie tells us all this. It tells us about the busty woman who, you know, who's going to get killed, and then she does, you know, like
the name dropping Jamie Lee Curtis all over the place.
Well, yeah, but I mean, exactly. But like they're referencing as you are watching it all the things that happen, which is great.
Don't you think it's funny that they're referencing the other franchise that wasn't Wes Craven?
yeah. It's just the whole thing. But what I think about the cast though is that they end up with just you end up them being really, really likable, really, really like quite realistic in a lot of ways. Sydney's character, I think, especially, like she is dealing with. She's dealing with it in a way that you actually would. Like she's shutting down emotionally. You see that in the relationship with Billy, and like his obviously, you know, there's some sexual thing going on, and maybe that's one of the motivations for killing her later. You know, trying to kill her. Like all of it adds up into this very, very realistic, grounded, actually surprisingly grounded set of relationships, because they act like teenagers, but at the same time, like that's how teenagers would respond to this. It isn't
good because I think they got these on. A lot of these actors are like 21, 22, which is obviously still not a teenager, but it's within the bounds of reasonability. It's not a 42-year-old Tobey Maguire playing Spider-Man in, you know, preschool. Like they're within the realms of believability for this age range. Like you said, them being small actors, you are right, Sam. You don't have any preconceptions. You're not seeing Courtney Cox is a good example in this movie because she's maybe the one. Her and Henry Winkler are the characters that you know from other things. So watching it, they're the characters you might see Courtney Cox and go, "Oh, it's Monica for Friends," and you've already formed an image of what this character's like that might be completely divorced from what the actual character in the movie's like, just because that's where you know them from. I think that's really, really easy to do. So horror movies have always starred nobody, by the way, because of budget concerns and the fact that they're trash. Yeah. So, like, this is normal. But I think in this movie, with a really good director who's obviously getting like the very best performances out of these characters, because I think a lot of these actors are. Neve Campbell's very good. Drew Barrymore is very good. McGowan and Shaggy and Billy, in other stuff, less so. They're more middling, you know.
But they work.
I don't know whether you guys agree.
Well, they work in the context of the film, don't they? They work in the context.
Yeah, they work in this movie, but what I'm saying is that Wes Craven's obviously getting like the best possible performance out of these guys as well.
Yeah. It's also a good mystery as well. I think that's the other thing that I really like is that you don't know what's happening all the way through. So as the characters are developing a little bit, we've always talked about how Billy like goes on this kind of roller coaster of maybe he's a psycho, maybe he's nice, maybe he's
all of it. Obviously a psycho, Sam. Do you remember his speech at the beginning when you first meet him and he comes through the window like a serial killer?
Yeah. Exactly.
And basically, again, he's like, I feel like our relationship used to be R-rated, but now we're going towards PG, and in a few weeks we might even be at television. And it's like,
can I just say as well?
Hold on 2 seconds. Fast forward to 2022, and you want to be on television. You want to be TV. Like, Jesus.
Dude. That scene honestly had one of the worst lines because they start making out and then she she stops it, but and then she's like, time for you to go, and he's like, oh, see what you do to me.
Red flag.
Okay, time for you to go, buddy.
Yeah,
take your bottle of red pills and get out. It was That was
you are right, Ross. But again, that's the movie we talked about earlier. Like, in that you are like, oh, is he the bad guy? I mean, the movie seems to be telling me pretty clearly that he's a psychopath.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, this is new territory. you got to go, bud.
I think they do a good job of sprinkling like the suspects throughout this movie, because obviously after Billy, I think the next big suspect is Henry Winkler until he gets killed. I think his energy, Ross. I think you said you thought he'd been in like Vietnam or something.
Oh, well, Just the way he because those kids who dressed up as Ghostface, as a prank, and he pulls them in and the scissors, and he's like, "You're expelled," but he's like, like scissors in their face, sort of thing. I didn't think he's the killer, but like, it gave me the impression like this is a principle because he was going to expel them. Don't forget, and then he started ripping them a new arsehole verbally, and that's what I was saying. Like, it wouldn't be out of place if like his backstory was he's a Vietnam vet, he's seen some shit, and he don't suffer fools. But no, I didn't peg him for the killer.
I thought he was.
You know who I pegged for the killer? I pegged fucking the deputy. I pegged him for the killer.
Arquette.
Yeah.
Maybe. He's another one that you think maybe because he's obviously got a thing for Sydney in this movie. The reason I thought Henry Winkler, because like, but it's clever because obviously the movie's intending for me to think that Henry Winkler is maybe the killer. Only really in the scene when he's killed. Because he sat looking at the mask. Like in a very like odd way. He's staring at this mask.
Yes, like a knowing way.
He's almost like wishing he could,
exactly.
He
was
almost
thinking like, am I really going to put this on and kill again? That's like how I read that look.
Would you do?
And I'm sure that's intentional. And obviously the way that he acts in the earlier scene is like, oh, he could split just snap and be a serial killer. But also, like we talked about this movie being a movie for movie lovers, like, and being aware of the tropes. He's Henry fucking Winkler. He is the biggest star in this movie by a country mile, and he's not credited. I was like, in a movie, that's the guy who's the killer, because why else do you get Henry Winkler to play this one-note character? But then he's killed, and it's like no, fuck you, it's not him either.
No. He's got a great career. This is what I would do if I was a millionaire, and I've been, I don't need to act anymore. I just like send emails to random directors and say, "Hey, can I be in your movie? Like, you don't have to pay me."
Bill Murray.
Yeah, like just like, can I just have some like catering for the day? That'd be fine. Maybe pay for my parking. That all right? And then you just turn up for 2 days. Do your thing and then leave. Like it
is incredibly good natured. You know what I mean? To be in a movie, and to be as a prominent a name as you are, and then for the good of the movie, so that it doesn't lose focus. You're like, okay, yeah, take me off the credits.
Get me off.
Do you know what I mean? And to be okay with that.
Yeah,
it's
quite a lot of humility for a Hollywood actor. To be
That's
honest.
The word. Thank you. Yeah,
and it's again, but again though, I think it adds to the movie that you have a guy in this role because it makes it a character you pay attention to. Whereas if it was just fucking schlubby potato-y principal of the school like we've seen in every other teen movie, like you wouldn't remember it. You wouldn't remember the scenes of them in. But because it's Henry Winkler and you're sat and again, because of your preconceptions, and this movie knows that going in that everyone's going to have these horror trope preconceptions. It's like, that's fucking Henry Winkler. I'm going to watch him until he does something because obviously, why would they have him in this movie?
Why are you here, Henry? What are you doing?
Tell me. David Arquette was a good pull. Was a good pull as a suspect, Ross. Why did you think he was the killer?
Well, I'll tell you why. And it was the scene where the killer phones Sydney after her boyfriend is arrested. And I was sort of saying, and this is at the point of the movie, like, oh, see, it's not the boyfriend because how could he call him from prison? And Dewey, she's like on the phone. She drops the phone and runs away crying. And Dewey comes back and he like picks up the phone and he goes, "Hello." And there was just something like, I don't know. It felt, obviously in retrospect it wasn't, but it felt forced.
You know what it is, Ross? And I can tell you exactly why. The camera pulls in. And this is, again, this is the filmmaking. They know that you've watched horror movies. Like, they know, so they're playing on that. So I think, again, that's intentional. Maybe not as like, we're going to think this guy's the killer for a long time. But it's that intentional camera pull of like, are they going to tell us something, us, the audience, that the characters don't know?
Yeah.
And again, it's just so competent.
It was that, and in addition to the scene where Sydney first gets attacked, and then she opens the front door, and Dewey's there with the mask and the knife, like, oh, he dropped this. And at that point I was like, motherfucker, gotcha.
The over-exaggerated, he jumps. Arquette jumps, doesn't he? Because there's a lot of like, so maybe this is like a Norman Bates style character.
I thought I was like, oh, I've got you, prick, I've got you, gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. So Let's the other thing that I really enjoy is like the use of the phone in this, which isn't a new thing, but I think it's one of the things that really makes the film stand out. Is that you've got this constant this constant interruption. The phone rings, and the way, again, back to sound design, even the way they shift that noise of the phone front and center on your TV, like it is there, you can't ignore it. Like
it's shrill, isn't it?
It really is, and they do so much to really like to use the phone calls and use the voice of Roger Jackson, who does a great job. And this guy is a big video, does a lot of video games, TV, voice acting, and I really, really just think it's so important to the movie. The character walking around on the phone, and that being such a visual thing in terms of like shit's going down. Someone's on the phone, but also just that constant ability for the characters to be interrupted, for them for nowhere to be safe because the phone can ring. Like it's a great use of that trope, I think.
And the clever idea to have it be a different actor as well. I think different movies where you've seen this, it's an actor using a voice modulator, but like you can never quite strip a voice of intonation. So if you're then listening to this person talk, like it's a really good way to not give anything away with that. Again, clever, competent filmmaking.
And a voice actor as well who knows how.
Someone whose job it is to do voices. Great.
Exactly. Perfect. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And if you go back on his IMDb, it's great. There's just like, Mass Effect, Red Dead. He in fact he played a 2021 Call of Duty Black Ops and Warzone. He played a character called Ghostface, which is quite funny. So there's like lots of again, someone knew that we have to get someone in here who can make every single syllable absolutely terrifying. Just using his voice, and we never get to see his face.
I got you like a fucking fish.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's really good. That's just so good. And as we see, like from Billy when he drops the cell phone, and it's hilarious because you're like the idea that someone would be carrying around a mobile phone in 1996 is like, you're suspicious.
What are you doing with the cell phone?
20 years later, it's like, why haven't you got a phone? Like, what are you trying to hide?
But it's also like, again, it's laying that false flag. Like, no one would be stupid enough to like have the cell phone on them and then drop it.
And the film wouldn't be stupid enough to show us that either. Like, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Now, there are two more things I want to talk about in this movie because we are running a bit long, perhaps. I want to talk about the ending because that's like a lot of the movie. How long was this movie, by the way? Because I didn't even it could be 4 hours and I didn't know.
I think it's about 1. Oh, go on. Yep.
I think it was 150. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. So the movie was like, it didn't matter because I was on board and I was entertained and I was interested.
Yeah.
But there's the ending, but there's also kind of like the before we get into the ending, I want to talk about the incompetence of the murderers, which I think is a little odd for a horror movie. Where even Drew Barrymore like has a decent fight with this guy. It's not like a done deal that he murders her. And that's that. Nev Campbell certainly has like a good kicks the shit out of this guy, and he's clever with the doors. And there's again, and I don't know how much of that is like playing with your subversions where you expect them to walk around a corner and get like their throat slit. None of the kills in this movie are like that. With the side of the cameraman, actually, he's the only one who literally does just get his throat slit when he turns around and sees this guy.
Yeah.
Every other kill in this movie is quite like drawn out. There's a fight involved.
And what's the common factor? The common factor is, I think, when the bad guy is fighting women, he gets his ass kicked. Like, both either one of them. That seems to me the thing that like Drew Barrymore has a good go, doesn't get there, but like she'll clock him in the face with the phone, and Tatum.
I mean, the girl with the garage door, she didn't
Tatum,
get
Rose McGowan, yeah.
She fights, and manages to injure, and obviously
throws the beers at him, and that's a cool scene. Apparently, there's a bit of trivia. I can never quite figure out where that garage door was around the house, where they couldn't see it from the road. All the people.
It's the massive, like the most ginormous house that you've ever seen.
I think
in your
it's
life.
the boat in front of it that Nev Campbell falls onto later.
Yeah.
I really like the death of like the idea that it stops. Like the garage door's like, right, well, I've killed the person in the trap door. I'll stop.
And a garage door has so much torque that it could.
Apparently,
they had
to like staple some straps to the door because Rose McGowan's so small that she kept falling out of it because the door was too big. Like
wow.
she couldn't get stuck. She was too little. Like the shoulders weren't broad enough. You kind of see it in the shot because she's kind of through it, and then it pans to the other side and she's further back. And like because they just obviously decided from a production point of view it wasn't worth like fitting a new door because this was a real house they filmed in at the end.
Yeah.
This wasn't a set. Well, relative. Some of it was a set, but like it's a real house. All these exterior shots are on. So let's talk about.
Well, 2 seconds. Ending. Just one last point, because I think just to your point, Dave, about how like fallible the bad guys are. They are not good at this. Like, and that is something that is not common. You get to see in movies very often, like especially horror movies, because the bad guys they're everywhere and they'll get you and they'll completely
military. Yeah.
Like you cannot win.
Well,
you cannot win. And I was, even you think it's quite surprising that they even tell you who the bad guy is, because really, like a film looking for a sequel would carry it on to the next one. Find out next time. The mystery will be unsolved, and that would be frustrating. So I think having them as kind of losers, and that's what we end up seeing at the end, it really tracks well. It really tracks well with who the actual killers are.
Which tracks well in that, like in Halloween, he's like a mental patient with like all this trauma. In Nightmare on Elm Street, he's literally a supernatural monster, like, who kills teenagers in their dreams.
He's gonna get you.
Exactly. So it's like, so to have it just be two, like you said at the time, loser is Shaggy and his mate. So it is a good way to have the reveal.
Shaggy and not Shaggy.
Shaggy and not Shaggy.
Let's talk about the ending.
So Shaggy and sort of Shaggy. So the ending actually is probably like, I really like a lot of it, but it's maybe the flabbiest part of the movie for me. Specifically, the scene in the kitchen is about twice as long as it needs to be.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I think everything up to that point, I think the Courtney Cox stuff, the David Arquette getting stabbed, where you get all the guys out of the way, Billy being dead, you think Billy's dead, that's a good subversion, because then again you're like, who is it? The windscreen wipers and the blood was fantastic. Nev Campbell just escaping, I think it's again like it's all very competently plotted in what she's doing and what she's running away and things.
It is too long though. I totally agree. And there's a funny bit of trivia that they had t-shirts printed that read "I survived scene 118," because it's 42 minutes long and was shot over 21 days after
nearly a month
at night, because it needs to all be dark. And you think, so I think there's too many scenes on like too many sofa scenes, when we're watching them watch the horror movie, and that could be like
we're watching them watch the horror
give
movie.
Me some of that a little bit earlier, like I think we get to the rules of the movie thing perhaps just a little bit too late, and what we wanted was like the virgin thing, the sex thing, like make that give us that earlier so that we're expecting it build up to. But anyway,
you can maybe have that like before the initial attack on Nev Campbell, like maybe after the first bit, and then you've got it straight off the bat. You introduce this nerd character a bit more.
But I definitely agree. Like we could tighten this up a little bit. We could also maybe get rid of like, oh, it's Dewey and fucking Monica going for a walk. All right, like
you need to see this.
Yeah, one of the guys has found the dad. Like that's enough. We could maybe remove, but again, like we're talking 1 hour 50 movie, so it's not egregious. But I think there is definitely
tweaks, sure, yeah. But like you say, it's not a grave offense.
No.
What I would cut is a lot of the Matthew Lillard stuff, the Shaggy stuff. I think Billy is a perfect like psychotic monster who's orchestrating all of this. What I would want is when they have the reveal that they're both the killer and they're in the kitchen and they've got the dad and they're like, we're going to kill daddy and then we're going to chop you up and then, and he goes to stab Shaggy. What I want him to do is fucking murder your mate here. Like really prove to me that you are off the rails. I want him to like stab him and Shaggy to go, what? And then you have Nev Campbell having like a winnable fight in this movie. I guess they want Courtney Cox to come back, but who could give it? Who could care? She should be dead in the van.
I thought he was going to be killed. Like once he says, I'm feeling woozy here. I thought he's going to like drop dead on the phone or something.
But it takes him 10 minutes to have all that, like him going, oh, and there's blood spraying everywhere. And, I think you cut me too bad, man. I'm not feeling well. But then suddenly he's fighting and it's like.
Well, that's it. Yeah, he gets second wind and he fucking tackles her. Yeah.
You can have a fight between him and Nev Campbell before the Billy reveal. And then you can still have that, like, Nev Campbell being the heroine of the movie. And exactly. But for me, it's just a bit too much fucking like. A bit too much chatting, a bit too much like, oh, my grandmasterly plan. And it maybe lays a bit too much out that we could have figured out. Like he mentions that, so the motives for this movie are kind of on the table, but only in this scene. So him and Shaggy killed Sydney's mum because she was shagging Billy's dad. And that made Billy upset. So that's why they killed her. They then killed Drew Barrymore. And this is peppered earlier in the movie. They killed Drew Barrymore because she dumped Shaggy. They mentioned that in the movie. And they were killing Sydney because Billy wanted to have sex with her before he killed her. That's been made very clear throughout this movie, and subverts the trope that plays into the trope that once you've had sex, you're not an innocent, and therefore you die in the movie.
Yeah.
And then they killed. Apparently, it was Billy who killed Rose McGowan's character because she'd insulted him earlier in the movie by calling him a creep, and like everyone else is kind of collateral damage. But it's they take the 10 minutes to explain most of that to you.
But that's where I think there's a replay value to this, to use a video game term, like in terms of just like you watch that again and you figure all that out and go, so why is
yeah, definitely.
That's I think that's always really fun that someone's considered, because I hadn't picked up most of that, to be honest. I hadn't thought about
right. I must have zoned out.
And the movie
but that's a good sign of a movie, isn't it? That you're not like nitpicking, because you are the nitpickiest person in the world, Ross.
That's
Pedant Cast. Absolutely. I'll do a 4-hour podcast about how power rankings are different, and so it's good. That's a good sign from a movie that you weren't thinking about this.
Yeah.
It does wrap up, and then as the film kind of resolves in a nice way that you think, well, that's the end of that then. Do you know what I mean? There is like that little jump scare at the end, isn't there? But really, the movie is kind of self-contained in that sense. I really like that. I love that we're not hanging on for the sequel.
It's not seeding a sequel.
Yeah. In the way that
I can only imagine these sequels really strain that. All the things that this movie establishes.
Scream 2, I haven't watched all of it, but
so you don't know anything.
No, but the scenes that I did watch is one of them where they're talking about the rules of how do you make a good sequel movie, and it does very much the same thing where it's like, look, that lens, looking back on itself. It's not maybe at the same level. But I think there's certainly things for us to explore. Maybe next Halloween we can watch the second Scream.
Second Scream, and I think Final Destination, because it goes into maybe it's the sequels, but it goes into the tropes of how to survive a horror movie or whatever.
that franchise. This isn't the Final Destination cast, but that franchise, Ross, that goes into the rules that establishes such a convoluted system of things in that movie, where in the second movie only one of them's alive and she's like living this hermit life, so is not
in a padded room. And
it's like and then every subsequent movie is like one person appears from a previous movie to be like, this is how you survive, and then they're killed,
and then they're dead. Can you teach us how to survive? Stay the fuck away from me. Stay away from me.
Those movies, Ross, are very much like those movies are about the kills. That is about the tension and about like the innovative,
and it's very gory. It is
very gory. I think especially that first movie, I think is great for that because it's terrifying, but maybe lacks the subtlety that this movie has, which it walks that line of like it's being very unsubtle about being subtle, if that makes sense. It's kind of tricky to explain.
But next year, stay tuned, folks.
I think it's a bit weak to not kill Courtney Cox and David Arquette in this movie as well, and that's obviously the one thing they did towards a sequel, where they filmed
these are two
scenes, so they could decide basically on how much buzz and what the test audiences said.
Yeah, and Courtney Cox is obviously like she's in at least the second one and probably more as well. I'm not sure.
And the last one.
Yeah, to me, that's why you mentioned the subtlety, you mentioned the craft. I think that's the thing that just rings out of every single pore of this film. Like it's just so well made, so that when you go, and again, I'm not a big horror guy. I really don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy the tension. I don't enjoy having to watch that goddamn camera angle where that camera angle where you know that there's someone behind the person in frame. It's so
I hate it, Sam. Unless it's subverted to make me think there's someone stood behind them and then there isn't. Which this movie does once or twice, I think, as well.
Yes, because you think, oh, that's the shot, or it's a shot of someone watching, and you kind of a little bit slightly. Because I know movie tropes and I know movie conventions because I've seen enough of them.
It's like I said about the David Arquette thing, where the camera pulls into his face when he's on that phone.
Exactly.
Like, obviously, Ross, you took from that he might be the killer. But did you, like, in your head think it's because the camera does that?
It might have been the reason, but I don't think I...
But that's what I'm saying. It's so
you shouldn't, exactly. Like, you shouldn't think about that, should you? Yeah.
Because you're not like a fucking loser who has to sit and, like, write fucking sketches about how they're filming a scene while you're watching it like me. But, like, that is so baked into how we enjoy films and how we interpret films, because those are the films we've watched. And I think it's incredibly self-aware.
All in all, for a cheesy classic horror flick in the 90s, it's a damn good movie, and it's a damn sight better than I expected.
Yeah.
And do you know what I'm afraid of? Do you know what I'm afraid of, guys? Because I really did think this was going to be trash when we decided we were going to do a horror movie. I think the last time we did a Halloween movie, did we do Teen Wolf or something?
Oh, there's a trash movie. Great movie.
Yeah, but we didn't do a horror movie. We did like a silly, like,
we pussied out
movie. And this one, I thought, number one, I knew very little about it, and I really thought it was like an actual horror movie. But I thought it was like a B-roll horror movie, starring nobody. They made 15 sequels that were straight to video, and it really isn't. This really kind of blew my expectations out of the water as a movie.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that I really appreciate about this film is it surprises you. It surprises you in a way that most films don't. And that's sad because like there's lots to be enjoyed if you just let a film wash over you, and that's kind of what this film forces you to do. You have to just watch it because it's playing with all your expectations, and that's a good thing.
I kind of wish we were doing Scary Movie next week, because I reckon that'd be
we're not doing Scary Movie.
Oh, please, Sam, please.
Jesus Christ.
Please. No, we're not. I don't think it's streaming. I don't think it's streaming is the big issue.
It's also not a movie from the 90s, and Dave, you've
I think Scary Movie 1 is from the 90s, Sam.
Yeah, I think it is, Sam.
They made like 5 of those movies.
Okay, maybe, but
what I'm going to justify myself by saying is that I think that movie is probably a lot cleverer than we gave it credit for at the time, because all we were seeing, having not seen this movie, having not seen like other movies that contributed to that parody, I think all we're seeing is like the dick in the wall, That, do you know what I mean? That's all. That's the level we're enjoying it on.
What a fucking accurate,
vivid.
Spot on, Dave. I'm afraid it's the year 2000 Scary Movie.
There we go. That's what I thought. So
before 9/11, you could take a gun on an airplane.
The reason is that this adds to another list of our more than 30 out of 100 or so movies that we've done, and another 100 TV shows. But 30, 40 we've done on 90s movies now. We have a problem. I think
what I made a mistake.
2000, so problem solved.
I made a mistake on my list, Sam, where I counted Toy Soldiers and Small Soldiers because I couldn't remember which one was the one about the toys and which one was the one starring Sean Astin and the Colombian cartel.
Soldiers, maybe.
I think it's Small Soldiers, but anyway, I think the count is about 35 movies we've done from the 1990s,
God,
out of a total of about 105. So, like a good third of all the movies we've ever done are from the 1990s.
We need a new decade.
We don't need a new decade, Sam, because the 90s was such an amazing decade for movies. Yeah. As I was scrolling through the list to see what we watched, I was like, "Oh, we should watch that. Oh, well, that's a great film. Oh, I've been meaning to watch that." Like, there are so many.
Right. Well, I'll settle for movies from the 1890s. Let's go.
Ooh! I bet we could dig up that world's first porn from like somewhere in the 1890s. I bet that wouldn't be very.
Yikes! Still listening to Dave critique the guy's porn.
That's for a different podcast.
That's for a different spin-off podcast.
That's imaginary.
All the best pornos, starring Dave and Sam.
Not starring.
Oh, sorry. All the best pornos, commentated by Dave and Sam.
That's the end. Bye-bye.
Oh, wow. Right, I'm going to hit stop. Fuck me. Oh, that was brilliant. Starring.
Starring. Oh, the podcast is called All the Best Pornos, not me and Sam starting all of the pornos from history. That's a weird take.
We recreate.
We use a time machine to go back and be the leading man in all of the pornos in history, all the big ones.
That's the sort of like that. That's the
chafing.
That's the sound base they'll